Hello and welcome back to Litcast. In this episode we're going to be exploring Eric Birling, the son of Arthur and Sybil Birling. So, Eric is Sheila's brother. He is employed in his father's business, he drinks more than is good for him, and he is the father of Daisy Renton's unborn child. What an introduction. So Eric is not a particularly sympathetic character initially, but like Sheila, he is deeply affected by the inspector's revelations. In Act 1, Eric and Sheila squabble just like children, and they're both really childlike in that first scene. But the guilt that they share over Eva's death brings them closer together, and they both grow up over the course of the play. Neither Mr. nor Mrs. Birling treats Eric as an adult. Mrs. Birling scolds him in varying degrees of severity throughout the play, while Mr. Birling seems determined not to listen to a word he says. So Eric drinks too much, we know that from the start, and it's Sheila who reveals this. He met a girl in the bar of the Palace Theatre and made her pregnant. He stole money from his father's firm to give to the girl. He accuses his mother of killing her own unborn grandchild, and he accepts his guilt, whether the inspector is a real police officer or not. So let's dive into this a bit more. When Sheila remarks early on in the play that Eric is squiffy, she draws the audience's attention to his drinking problem. Eric is revealed as a young man who drinks far too much, possibly as an outlet for his frustration, which is both personal, because his parents still treat him like a child, and professional. Apparently he's not living up to Mr. Birling's expectations at work. So think about the interaction between Birling and Gerald in that first act, and the fact that Eric just doesn't seem to be in on the action there. Birling is much more interested in getting Gerald into the family as a son than nurturing his own son, Eric. So think about how that might make you feel as a child. You want to please your parents, and he can't really seem to do anything right. And that frustration is potentially leading to some of these bad habits. Although Eric is guilty of irresponsibly fathering a child with a woman he had no intention of marrying, Priestley also seems keen to show that, ultimately, he still has more of a social conscience than Gerald and either of his parents. For example, Eric seems to understand the plight of Birling's underpaid workforce. He says to Mr. Birling, why shouldn't they try for higher wages? We try for the highest possible prices, and I don't see why she should have been sacked just because she'd got a bit more spirit than the others. You said yourself she was a good worker. I'd have let her stay. So you can see immediately there that contrast between generations and the way perhaps Eric would handle the business. And maybe part of this attitude is why Mr. Birling feels like he's not performing how he should, because they don't embody the same ideology. An ideology is like a belief and value system that you have. And everyone sort of has their own ideology, but then there are ideologies you can subscribe to or believe in. Absent from Act 2 entirely, Eric does the right thing by returning in Act 3 to face the inspector's interrogation. Now, during the evening, both Eric and Gerald leave the Birling house to reflect upon what they've done. And we can see again the contrast between these two characters. So while Gerald is walking, he is focused on thinking about the identity of the inspector and trying to catch him out. However, Eric goes out to cool off and returns determined to accept his responsibility. So the contrast between what these two characters do during their reflection time shows the different characters that they are and the different values that they have. Despite evidence of previous dishonesty, Priestley seems to be suggesting that Eric is the better man. So thinking sometimes about these characters in comparison with each other can be really useful in showing how they therefore exemplify some of the context or how they exemplify certain themes. When Eric hears about his mother's refusal to assist Eva, he is devastated. He says, you killed her and the child she'd have had too. My child, your own grandchild. And the irony that Mrs. Birling who is so fixated on keeping her family together, keeping the family name, keeping her family pristine, has dealt the final blow and directly harmed one of her own family by blood. The irony is not lost there. Like Sheila, Eric seems unlikely to forget the lessons he's learned in his encounter with the inspector. Eric is linked with themes of responsibility, class, shame and blame, secrets and lies. So try to think about Eric as a bit of a misfit. He's not quite at ease, half shy, half assertive. He's weak-willed and he looks for easy ways out of trouble. And if you think about that attitude, that's again quite a childish, naive attitude to have. And you have to question to what extent he's actually been allowed to grow up. So it's interesting that Priestley is criticising the class system hugely. But it's not just showing the negative impact on the working classes, although that is, of course, the main focus. He's also showing how the restrictions on some of the middle and upper classes actually have negative impact on people stuck in those as well. He sees his father as not the kind of father a chap could go to when he's in trouble. And again, we see that he doesn't share his father's hard-headed attitude to business and would run the company a little different to his father. The unpleasant side of his character is brought out when he drinks. He insists on going home with the girl but cannot remember what happened that first time. He makes the girl pregnant, the girl is of course Eva, and steals money from his father's firm. When the girl suspects he's stolen the money, she refuses to take any more and also refuses to marry him. Like Sheila, Eric believes their experiences at the hands of the inspector should make them improve their behaviour. So, if you think about the contrast between the old and the young characters in this. And think about as well the fact that Eric leaving the room when he does and coming back when he does, because it's such a dramatic, especially him sort of coming back into the room, is such a dramatic moment. That's deliberately done by Priestley. So you can, again, talk about that in terms of dramatic structure and building tension. The fact that Eric is absent for all of the conversation that leads up to them working out that he is the father of Eva Smith's child. All right, so that is a little bit of information and a couple of key quotes around the character of Eric Birling. Remember, you always need to think about these characters as constructs, as vehicles for Priestley to deliver his message to an audience, and thinking about them as well alongside the themes, the context, and trying to compare and contrast them and thinking about their relationships. That's the best way to explore the characters holistically and to get yourself some good marks in the exam. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more episodes for An Inspector Calls very soon, and I will see you then. Listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. You can also find us on other social media channels, including YouTube, where you'll also find our Litcast live episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again.